And welcome back, Bears fans. My name is Quinten Krzysko. I am joined by Nick Demao. The Chicago Bears just drafted. Who did they draft, Nick?
A tight end, the one, but maybe not the one we were all expecting.
Maybe not the one we were all expecting. The one that some of us were hoping for. We've been
Right,
talking
right.
about very much on building the board, as our friend Sonny Verma put in our chat during the live stream. The guy that he picked, his guy, his number 10 pick, Colston Loveland, out of Michigan. You are a Chicago Bear. Nick, how are you feeling?
I feel pretty good about it. I'm glad they didn't trade up. I'm glad they let the board shake out the way it did. I think, you see what a guy like Sam Laporta did for the Lions offense. Ben Johnson wants to add weapons to his offense. Colston Loveland seems to be a guy who is the total package at tight end, very athletic, very good receiver. So I'm excited to see what Ben Johnson can do. I think he also complements Cole Kmet's game well. They should be a pretty potent duo for the Bears for the next few seasons. So I'm excited. How about you, Q?
I'm feeling good about it, Nick. I've said all week, I really don't want a tight end at 10.
Right.
Right? Like, it just feels like tight ends tend to come along slowly. They're not an instant add to your offense most of the time. They're a add for 2 years down the road. Sam Laporta was an instant add. So maybe Ben Johnson has that secret sauce, that Michael secret stuff, Ben's secret
Right.
stuff,
Right.
so to say. But it's not like I struggle to count on that. And I wasn't sure I wanted a tight end here. But if it was a tight end, I wanted Colston Loveland, because Colston Loveland is a weapon in my eyes. Tyler Warren is much more of the inline tight end that you already have with Cole Kmet in my mind. Colston Loveland gives you more variety with that. He gives you, like, if you want to throw back to old Patriots days, right? Yeah, Gronk was the big inline, beating people up. Colston and Aaron Hernandez was more of a receiver, right? Like, well, he was a lot of other things
Don't
too.
leave me hanging. Don't leave me hanging.
Yeah. We'll stay away from the extracurriculars, but on the football field, he was a receiver.
Yes.
That's what you get in Colston Loveland. Cole Kmet, you need to become a better blocker, because I think you're going to be blocking a lot more when you're in 12 personnel. And I do like the way it opens them up in 12 personnel. But ultimately, with Loveland, I feel good about him. I don't feel great about him, because the injuries do concern me with him. But we'll get into that a little bit more here as we go. Nick, just off the top of your head, how much do you think Colston Loveland is going to play this year?
Oh, that's a good question. I do think, if this was last year's Bears with Shane Waldron and the Matt Eberflus show, I doubt he would get much playing time, because I don't know if they were creative enough to come up with a couple of interesting packages to include him in. I do think, you can look at how they use Roma Dunze to, kind of case in point of how they really didn't understand how to use a particular player to their strengths. I do think Ben Johnson has shown with Detroit that he can maximize a player's strengths, and even if it's for limited snaps, he can get the most out of that player. So, I mean, I could see Colston Loveland coming in and being one of these guys who maybe has like 25 catches, but like 7 touchdowns, something crazy like that, where it's, one of these, he's used in the red zone as a big target for Caleb Williams. He's a guy that can go up and get it. He's a guy who can, is a matchup nightmare. Excuse me. Yeah, I do wonder how much he'll be. Excuse me. I'm allergic to the pick. No, like, I do wonder, I'm like you. Cole Kmet came along slowly. He had Jimmy Graham ahead of him for a couple of years. So I do think it's one of those picks where you have to practice patience. But if he develops at the trajectory that I know a lot of our scouts thought, he could really be a truly a weapon. Oh, Hawkins, that's a good comp that I've seen for him as well. If he can come reach his potential, he could be
and I'm looking this up because Hawkinson, I guess he was traded in 22. Okay. I thought Laporta was already there when Hawkinson was traded, but I guess Hawkinson was traded the year before Laporta got there. Okay. So that throws my thought process out the window. I was thinking that, maybe it'll be a similar progression
Right.
what you saw with Laporta and Hawkinson, but probably not because Laporta was the guy in Detroit when he got drafted. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the player profile here, and I'm going to pull up our scouting report. And we did this a little bit on the live stream already, but we're going to go through it again for the podcast. Colston Loveland, tight end out of Michigan, ideal NFL position. I said he's a move tight end, so that means like Nick, you know this, but I'm going to explain it anyways. In the NFL, in football in general, you tend to have a Y tight end, which is the guy who is in line. He is on the line of scrimmage. This guy needs to be a good run blocker or a capable run blocker. He's pass blocking. I mean, honestly, I don't even care about tight ends pass blocking that much. It's just you don't ask them to do that much outside of chip. So like when I'm talking tight end blocking, especially in line, I'm like, I want to see the run blocking effort. I want a guy who likes contact and is mean and aggressive. That's going to be Cole Kmet. Ben Johnson said when he mentioned Cole Kmet, it's like, we got to get that blocking up to par. It'll be important.
Yeah.
It will, because Colston Loveland, he is aggressive. He is an angry blocker. He wants to put you in the dirt, but he's 245 pounds.
Right.
And I think he has room to add mass over the next few years and become an inline guy. But right now, Cole Kmet is going to be your inline. Colston Loveland's going to be your move tight end. That's the guy who you see tight ends in motion all the time in the backfield. They might line up in like a fullback spot. They might play a little slot receiver. That's what Colston Loveland is going to be in this offense. I think much more of that movement-based guy who you're using as a weapon all over the field, a mismatch weapon. Get him on linebackers. Get him in the post against safeties. You know, there's a lot of stuff that you can do with his size at 6'5" and his movement abilities against linebackers that can be really fun. Now, he's 20 years old or 21 years old. He just turned 21. Initially, I had a top 40 draft projection on him. As we got further along, and that was like, you know, I'd only scouted maybe 50 players at that point. As we got along with everything, he became higher and higher on my board. He ended up in the top 15 for me. At least it might have been a little higher than that. Him and Tyler Warren were very closely ranked. I had Colston Loveland slightly above Warren. But looking at his strengths and weaknesses. So on strengths, first thing I got is rare physical traits. This guy's got a long, springy frame, explosive athleticism, and I thought really impressive contact balance. There are some moments where he looks kind of like a baby deer. But I mean, for the most part, when he's running with the football, it's like, okay, this guy can break some tackles. He's not falling down at first contact. I liked what I saw. Fluid athleticism. I thought he had really loose hips for his size as a route runner, and that means he can be deceptive in his routes some, right? Like he can sink his hips down. He can change direction fairly smoothly. And a lot of this is for a 6'5", 245 pound guy. Yeah. But I mean, I think it's really strong for any tight end in the league to be able to move the way that he does. And a moldable frame. He's got some bend to his frame, some good flexibility. But he can also go up and get the football. This guy is a monster at the catch point. He can dunk on people. So you almost get a little bit of X receiver element to him. Slow X receiver because the tight end, you know, the guy ain't going to be running a 4.4 or 4.5, but he's still fast for the tight end. And he had some really impressive dunks in college on people. And a very willing blocker. This guy throws his body around, man. He wants to make you hurt. Like the blurb that I had in him on our draft page here is Colston Loveland loves football. I have zero doubts about that. He relishes contact and dreams of putting opponents in the dirt. This guy has, I think, more fun blocking than he does running routes, which is, you don't find, like, that is a different football player.
And that's like George Kittle, like you said, like George Kittle, like loves like blocking, like.
Yeah, the guy just loves to get physical with people and to beat them in football. Last point here, has that dog in him. He has no quit as a receiver or a blocker. He has a fiery play demeanor, and he thoroughly believes he can block anyone in the league. Like, he believes he can block that 340-pound nose tackle. It's inspiring. On the weaknesses, underweight, He's a little thin. He's got a wiry frame. He can get pushed around when he doesn't make that first significant contact. Like as a blocker, he can jolt people. But if he doesn't jolt you, he's gonna get moved. Like he needs to be explosive into that first contact. He's hyper aggressive. He's too eager to lunge into defenders, throw his get out over his toes and throw his shoulders into the block, which can get him in trouble at times. Gets off balance, ends up in the dirt. It's not good blocking form.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I don't worry about that much with tight end.
Yeah,
he's gonna have to put on weight to be an inline guy, to be a blocker. But like no tight ends are really good blockers right now. All I care about is demeanor and willingness, and he has those two in spades. Limited route tree. He played at Michigan. Michigan doesn't really throw the football.
Right.
Like, when they did throw the football, he was really good, but they don't do it a ton. So that he did have a limited route tree. He's going to have to learn to expand that in the NFL. I think he has all the physical capabilities to do it. And the last negative was lapses in awareness. There are occasional issues with focus drops, and play awareness can kind of wane in moments, especially during the scramble drill. The comps that I had for him, the ceiling is George Kittle, as you mentioned a little moment ago.
Yeah.
Like he plays the game like George Kittle. The floor is Tyler Eifert, who we talked again a little bit about this on the stream, but we're gonna talk about it again. Tyler Eifert was a very highly drafted guy, right? He went 21 overall to the Bengals back in 2013, 6'6", 255. With Loveland, we're talking, 6'5", 245. So a similar frame. Eifert had a little more weight on him, but Eifert couldn't stay healthy. Loveland is coming in the league pre-injured.
Right.
He just had a labrum restructure surgery back in January, I believe, to completely repair his labrum. Shoulder injuries are complicated. They're not things that tend to go away quickly. Jalen Johnson still has shoulder issues.
Yeah.
He had a shoulder issue coming out of college. Tyler Eifert had a shoulder issue coming out of college. It kept popping up throughout his career. He had a ton of other injuries throughout. He had knee injuries. He had foot injuries. He had back injuries. So it wasn't all the shoulder that kept him out. But like, you look at his profile, his rookie year, he was good. Then couldn't stay on the field his second year. Made a Pro Bowl his third year. Then the next 3 years, he couldn't stay on the field. He played a total of 14 games over the next 3 years before 2 so-so years and retiring, 8 years in the league. That's the floor for Loveland in my mind. The only thing that keeps this guy from becoming a good football player, as far as I can see, is injuries. Yeah. But his play style and his weight do make me wonder if injuries might be a louder concern for this player. Nick, what do you think of all that?
Yeah, I mean, he does. You watch him, and he has a very long, lanky frame, so it is noticeable on film. Like some guys you see, and maybe they wear the weight better, or he looks lanky, but he's, like you said, I think he can put on weight. Kind of also reminds me of I don't know if you remember Jermichael Finley with the Packers. He was another really tall kind of, and I think he had more concussion injuries that forced him now to retire. But yeah, it's never good when you're drafting damaged goods, which, I mean, I don't want to call the guy damaged goods, but he is coming into the league injured. So you just kind of have to hope maybe it was a one-off thing. Do you know, was his injury a result of, I mean, the labrum that can occur from just wear and tear, or was it a contact? Like, did he fall on his shoulder and injure it, or
I think I believe it can be something as simple as like you've had some damage there already, and you land and plant your arm the wrong way.
Yeah,
that's my understanding. My dad actually just tore his labrum, but he, we're comparing a 20-year-old to a guy in his like 50s. Like, it's a different aspect.
Yeah, my sister tore hers, but I know she played volleyball pretty competitively, so it was a wear and tear from just the motion over and over. And I guess it's not something that, I mean, Drew Brees tore his labrum before he went and signed with the Saints. Then he put together a Hall of Fame career in New Orleans. Yeah. So it's not something that, I think anytime it's an injury, you kind of have concerns, but there was a lot of this draft had quite a few players who I think, there's a lot of guys that had injury. Josh Simmons was a tackle you and I had talked about that maybe the Bears are looking at, and his was a lot more significant of an injury. But
yeah,
I like the pick. Like I said, I'm glad they didn't trade up to draft Gentry. I'm glad they stayed where they did. They didn't give up any resources to move around. And they still have their 2 second-round picks, depending on what they do the rest of the evening. So, you're putting all your eggs in Ben Johnson's basket and kind of hoping but when Matt Nagy came in, one of the first guys he signed was Trey Burton, which was, he was that move tight end for Matt Nagy. And he put up, I think his first year before he tore his groin, it was like an 800 some yard. I mean, you could tell how important he was to the offense. Ben Johnson, a lot of his influence comes from Sean Payton. You saw what they did with Jimmy Graham for years, and how pivotal he was to making that New Orleans offense hum. So the logic tracks, like I said, it's rich for a tight end, but it's also guys like him if they reach their ceiling, you're not going to find them in free agency. Like George Kittle is not going to hit free agent. That's a guy that these are guys that you kind of have to draft. Travis Kelce is a guy, he's getting older, so he's less of the move tight end, but you have to find these guys in the draft. And, you're hoping he can skirt the injury issue, put on some weight, get a little bit stronger play strength, and, have a long, productive career. If this was, like I said, if this was last year's team drafting, I had no faith in them developing, seeing after how they kind of criminally underused Rome Odunze. With Ben Johnson, I do think the proof is in the pudding. So you kind of just, you look at the potential of what he could become under Ben Johnson. And I do think it could be, a match made in heaven for the long term.
Yeah, I'm absolutely excited about the potential of what this offense looks like with a really strong 12 personnel.
Yeah, because
some of that. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, sorry to cut you off. You think about how the Bears really, outside of that, out of Oz, the guy they don't really have someone that can play slot or it's a position where you could see Loveland getting a decent bit of snaps, and manning that slot position, because they didn't re-sign Keenan Allen, and Rome and DJ are your 2 outside boundary receivers. So it's a spot that you could see Loveland doing some damage in. So I think the fit's good. Like I said, it's just, the injury concerns are going to be a red flag, but who knows, if he didn't have injury concerns, he could be one of these tight ends that they're talking about as a top 5 pick. So I think, getting him at 10 and hoping that he doesn't have any further injuries is a good gamble.
Yeah. Something just dawned on me as you're saying that, and I want to see if I can find some measurables on a guy whose name is Marquez Colston.
Oh my gosh, I remember. Yeah.
Marquez Colston made his career as a power slot for Sean Payton's offense.
Yes. Yeah.
Ben Johnson draws a lot from Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm.
I think Colston Loveland in the slot makes a lot of sense. Or Colston Loveland in a Marquez Colston, the Colston aspect.
Just
threw me off. But in that playing kind of some similar role there could make a lot of sense. I mean, I don't think Colston Loveland's running a 4.5.
Right.
4.5 isn't fast either. Like it's Marquez Colston didn't make his career being a freak athlete.
Mm-hmm.
He made his career off size. And I wonder if you're going to see some similar aspects to the way that they deploy Colston Loveland to the way that Marquez Colston was deployed in New Orleans all those years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That is a good pull, because Marcus Colston, I'm trying to look back at what they had. Detroit didn't really have a power slot, but
they had Amon Ra, who
I was gonna say, you're not gonna mess with that. I do think I do think fans are probably struggling with reconciling taking Loveland over Tyler Warren, and I do think it was very much more of a fit type situation. And I just think it. I think Tyler Warren could have a really good career. I wonder, I think the ceiling with Loveland is just so much higher from the pure raw athleticism, and you're not that Warren's a subpar athlete, but like you said, I look at Warren as kind of like a slightly better version of Cole Kmet. Like, as far as like they're making,
Dallas Goedert was my comp for him, which
okay,
is
yeah,
Dallas Goedert's good. He's
yeah,
not George Kittle,
right, right,
and not to say Colston Loveland is George Kittle, but like I think that is the ceiling with him. Whereas I
right.
think the ceiling for Warren is very similar to Goddard.
Yeah, it's there's a reason, not to bring it back to fantasy football, but anyone that's played fantasy football knows it's a wasteland when it comes to tight ends, and it's because there's only a few that can do what a guy like Colston Loveland, if he reaches his ceiling, can do. Kyle Pitts was probably the last guy drafted really high who I think was supposed to have this impact. And I think you could make a case that his shortcomings in the NFL have a lot to do with this, the misuse of him during Arthur Smith's tenure. And they're still kind of trying to figure out how to use him. I think,
well, and also he had a pedal foot injury that
right.
he's never really been the same since. Like his burst has never looked the same since that injury.
Yeah. See, I mean, that's a good point, because it's a shoulder injury, but I do, if he's going to get injured, I'd prefer that over, we were looking up Eifert and he had so many broken ankle or, lower leg injuries.
He had pedal foot. He had multiple pedal foot issues.
And a shoulder is unfortunate, but it doesn't cause as much concern as if you were like, oh, he, broke his ankle and missed 6 games, but he's hopefully coming back, because I think we've seen in Chicago plenty of times guys who have, had that issue where they've messed up something in their lower leg, and then it just takes out any burst that they might have had. And not that I think Loveland is a guy that has to rely solely on his athleticism, but it is definitely one of the reasons the Bears drafted him, because he's a pure weapon. So
yeah,
I'll be interested how they use him. I think, I've been pounding the table for a while for them to get, they've tried to address the second tight end spot for so long, and it's just been one failure after another. When you consider Gerald Everett, Robert Tonyan, gosh, I mean, they've not had 2 decent tight ends probably since Jimmy Graham and Cole Kmet, and that was only because Jimmy Graham was getting 10 touchdowns in the red zone only. But I think it's interesting. I mean, I'll never really complain about surrounding Caleb Williams with as many weapons as possible. So, you can argue about whether you prefer Warren over Loveland, which I know hordes of Bears fans are doing right now, but I think at the end of the day, you got a weapon, and that's, that's what you have to hang your hat on, and hope Ben Johnson is half as good as he looked in Detroit, because that's still a really good offensive coach.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pumped about it. I opened the show saying I would feel a little underwhelmed with Warren, and I don't feel that way with Loveland. I feel energized by the pick of Loveland, even though I wasn't hoping for a tight end here. With Gene T gone, I think this was kind of the way. I really do.
So what do you think Cole Kmet's future looks like in Chicago? Do you think this is a long-term pairing, or do you think this is a changing of the guard type, prepping that for, maybe not this year, but next year they're going to move on? Because they just signed the guy from Miami. I can't remember his name.
All you folks out there, make sure you use Over the Cap rather than Spot Track. Over the Cap is much more accurate. But let's see. So, I mean, the Bears can move on from Kmet next year.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't be shocked if they tried to move him for a 2nd-round pick, if they can.
This year?
Next offseason.
Right.
If Loveland comes back from the injury, looks good, plays well, and shows the ability to add mass.
Right.
If one of those things doesn't happen, you might hang on to Cole Kmet long term.
It's good insurance. I mean, he's great insurance. They just signed the guy out of Miami. He was like specifically a run blocking tight end.
Yeah,
I can't
Durham
remember.
Smythe.
That's right, Smythe. Yeah, it'll be. I really like the idea of two good tight ends. I certainly don't want them to move on from Komet. I wonder what the long term thinking is with this. With this move, if this is a is this a precursor to them maybe considering next year moving on from him, or are they just kind of playing it by ear and seeing how the two coexist and then going from there?
Nick, is Cole Kmet still doing a podcast mid-season this year?
For CHGO? Yeah. I don't know. That's going to be that'll be interesting. Like,
if I were Ben Johnson, the first thing I would have said when I walked in the Bears locker, not first thing, but like, I would have made it clear, we're getting rid of these fucking podcasts.
Oh my God. I would have, it's such an insane, because nothing is ever, it just, nothing good comes of it because they never really say anything of any sort of substance. And it just seems like it serves nothing more than a distraction. And I'm just like, I'm the same way. I'd have been like, dude, you guys were 5-12 last year. Like, cut out the extraneous stuff. We're just going to focus on football. And that is one thing.
I'm not just saying that because we're direct competitors.
No, not at all. No,
who are hopelessly undermanned.
No, trust me. I'm all for like Lance Briggs, even Olin Kreutz, Alex Brown, these former players that get on there. And I think it's such a weird, when they get the players that come in that are currently playing, it just seems you're never getting any new nuggets of information. And it just seems, it almost seems like an obligation they have to fulfill. So it's like, I don't know why they bother with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, I do like that they're filling, this is a big draft pick in the sense of they're getting a guy that loves football. They're getting a guy with a high motor, lots of tenacity. You and I talked about this numerous times when we're scouting, that we just love when we find someone that you can just tell on tape, is because those guys, I feel like the floor with them is so much higher.
It's just injuries.
Yeah,
we find those guys.
Yeah, and it's
injuries and athletic limitations. But like,
yeah,
they don't have athletic limitations. It's just injuries.
It is, and it's you just identify those guys, and yeah, so long as they're, look at Jack Sanborn. Like, I don't think, I know he moved on to the Cowboys and he didn't really have a spot on the Bears, but that's an undrafted free agent who every time he played, I felt like he was, you could tell there was athletic limitations, but you would tell this is just a football player. Like, and he's probably going to stick around in the NFL for 10 years in some form or fashion because those guys just latch on. And, I think with Colston Loveland, you get a guy that both loves football and has the athletic traits, then, you are talking about guys like George Kittle, and that those are unicorns. So yeah, you hope for the development. You hope Ben Johnson. I just saw a tweet that when Ben Johnson met Colston Loveland, he told him he reminded him of Sam Laporta. So it's obvious they identified him early as someone that was, this could be an integral part of the offense. So let's make sure we get him. And if that's the case, I'm glad they rested on their laurels, didn't trade up and just kind of let him come to them. So
Nick, I'm excited. We've got 2 more picks or 3 more picks tomorrow. Thank God they didn't move up and get rid of one of those picks.
Exactly.
But, any final thoughts before we close this thing out, Nick?
No, I'll be curious who's available, who is available. I think there's been a few surprises already thus far in the draft. See, I'll be interested to see how the board shakes out, because the reason I wanted them to keep those 2 picks were I think there's going to be a lot of talent available that maybe fans didn't anticipate being available in the second round. So it'll be interesting who gets drafted tonight and who's still available for the Pickens tomorrow.
For the Zach Pickens.
Yes. George Pickens.
Yeah. For Worm Boy.
Yeah, exactly.
But thank you guys so much for watching with us, listening with us. We have Scott asking, did the Bears trade back into the first round? I think they might. If they do, we'll jump back on with you guys. Yeah. But thank you guys for listening, watching. I'm going to go upload this thing as a podcast right now so you guys have it ready to go tonight. And we will see you guys next time.
See you later.